All right, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the one and only Wrestling Otaku channel. Of course, your personification of excellence on YouTube and YWC. We're the best reviews wrestling and your three-time YWC channel of the year. And I'm back here. It is now officially Wednesday night, September 24th, 2025, and it is Wednesday. You know what that means. So, got through watching this week's edition of, or tonight's episode of Dynamite. Yeah, it just went off the air about 30 or so minutes ago, 45 minutes or so ago. We're approaching 11 p.m. here Eastern time. Got off work a little while ago. I actually had to go back and watch or catch the rest of the show that I missed because I didn't get off of work till like 9. And so when I came home, it was 9:10, 9:15. So I went back and got the results for the stuff I missed and go check out the highlights and such that I missed. But yeah, so AEW Dynamite came on tonight. Watched it a little while ago. Solid show. The parts that I did see. And of course, this was a show that was capped off by my girl, man. My girl, my woman. Oh my God, I've been such a long time fan of her, man. She might as well be my girl, my woman. My future wife, man, that's my future wife right there. My future waifu, the future mother of my children, my future baby mama. Okay, maybe that's going a little too far. But anyway, my girl, my woman, Kris Statlander, Chrissy Bear. Oh man, Kris Stat, she looked fucking, oh my God, she looked fucking awesome tonight. She looked amazing tonight. Hot as hell as usual. She went back with the old retro, kind of somewhat of a throwback to her retro, when she was doing the alien gimmick or whatever. And she got a new theme and all that. And she looked really, really nice with that AEW Women's World Championship that she won, of course, at All Out. And much love to her, man. Much respect. Big ups to her, man. She deserves it. She deserves that time in the limelight. And she main evented tonight's episode of Dynamite. She defended her first official title defense since becoming champion. She defended against Mina Shirakawa in the main event of tonight's AEW Dynamite show. Hell of an effort by both ladies. Of course, my girl Kris Statlander pulled out the victory with that modified kind of pin cover. It calls us, they call it the seat belt or whatever they call it. And so Kris Statlander beats Mina Shirakawa, successfully retains the AEW Women's World Title. Not that anybody was expecting, Kris Statlander to lose in her first title defense in the main event of Dynamite. But yeah, Kris Statlander puts away Mina Shirakawa. Solid match, solid main event. I'm so glad they're finally giving Kris Statlander the spotlight and the respect that she deserves, man. In the main event, she main events Dynamite, and she was a big part of the main event segment of Dynamite as well. So then after the match, you had the Death Riders come out. Well, Wheeler Yuta was already out there. He was in her corner, basically, because they got, history from when they were part of the Best Friends and all that, for Orange Cassidy. Which, by the way, Orange Cassidy apparently returned tonight. And I got to go back and catch that. But anyway, so Wheeler Yuta came in, basically was, celebrating with her, clapping and so on and so forth. And you had Harley Cameron out there. And then the Death Riders came out, all en masse. Jon Moxley, Marina Shafir, Claudio Castagnoli, I believe Pac was out there. And, Pac also returned, recently at All Out. And so they all kind of got in the ring, and it looked like, and the Death Riders have been, teasing, recruiting Kris Statlander for weeks now, for months now. And they were all in the ring, and it looked like, it was going to be like Kris Statlander was finally going to join the Death Riders. She was being kind of sworn in, if you will. So yeah, Wheeler Yuta basically gave her a hug, and she hugged him back, and Wheeler Yuta raised her arm, in victory. She had the women's title around her waist, the AEW Women's World title around her waist, and everybody was kind of looking, waiting to see what would happen if Kris Statlander would join the Death Riders. And then all of a sudden, Statlander clotheslines fucking Wheeler Yuta out of his shoes. The Death Riders were stunned. Jon Moxley was stunned. Marina Shafir goes to attack Statlander. Stat ducks, gets right up in the face of Jon Moxley, gives him the double flips off Jon Moxley with both fingers, gives him the double FU, the double middle finger, and darts out of the ring with Harley Cameron and goes through the crowd. And then afterwards, the Death Riders were like dumbfounded afterwards. And then Darby Allin came out with a flamethrower, and that was a fucking cool moment there. And Darby Allin ended up challenging Jon Moxley to an I Quit match at Wrestle Dream. So that ought to be fun. But the big story here is Kris Statlander does not join the Death Riders. She basically emphatically says F you to the Death Riders and their offer for her to join. So really glad on that, because it's about time Kris Statlander kind of has her own spotlight. She kind of stands on her own, and she's kind of her own woman. It's great to see. It's great to see, because after all, that's my bae right there. That's my girl right there. I really don't want to see her being recruited again. So glad Kris Statlander. I'm glad she's in the main event. Glad she's finally getting the respect that she deserves. Being in the main event picture, she's the AEW Women's World Champion. Much deserved. Long time, much deserved. And I'm really glad. I'm really glad that AEW's finally giving her the spotlight, giving her the ball to run with. In the women's division. So good stuff, man. Great way to close out the show. So that was the one thing I want to get. One of two things I want to comment on here with this Dynamite. So the other big story, which of course came on right before this, was Tony Khan, of course, AEW owner, president, so on and so forth. Tony Khan basically had a big announcement for tonight, and we were all wondering what it was. Whenever Tony Khan has these big announcements, everybody kind of on social media is clamoring as to, what it is or what he's going to say. So his big announcement was that AEW finally, after months and months, you could argue years and years of fans wanting and craving and demanding it, finally, AEW is going to give the fans what they want. Finally, for the first time in AEW's history, AEW will be introducing a new championship in the women's division. That being the AEW Women's World Tag Team Championships were officially announced on the show. They introduced them. Renee Young showed the titles themselves, at ringside. Beautiful looking titles, by the way. And so very soon, we are going to crown the inaugural AEW Women's World Tag Team Champions. And so, boy, what an announcement, man. I'm telling you, dude, especially in the past year, people on social media have been really, really, begging and clamoring for AEW to get to introduce women's tag team division, to introduce women's tag team titles. And there was a story a little while ago, early this year, about how AEW had women's tag belts made, but they never introduced them officially. And now finally they've introduced them. Tony Khan's announcement was that AEW will be crowning very soon the first ever AEW Women's World Tag Team Champions. And so, looking forward to that, man. I personally, I like it. The fans have been asking for it for a long time. Like I said, dating back to freaking years. Dating back to, 2022, 2023. Maybe even before that, fans were asking for a women's tag division in AEW. And so, finally we're getting it. So yeah, and the belts look solid, and the belts look really good. The belts look beautiful, and so can't wait to see how they do this thing. It's going to be interesting. I imagine there's going to be some semblance of a tournament or some kind of qualifying matches or some kind of tournament featuring, tag teams in the women's division in AEW. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how they introduce these things. Now, for the longest time, and this is something that I've been meaning to talk about in video, but I never really got the chance to, but now I figure I might as well, since now, the AEW women's tag belts have been introduced. In regards to AEW introducing a tag team division, or for a women's tag division, my stance was, I'm open to it, but at the same time, it all depends on how they approach it. It all depends on how they book it. It all depends on how they go about it. You have to go about it a certain way. You don't want to do the same thing like WWE did, where they just randomly threw them out there just because, or WWE did it, for, the reason why. The reason why WWE did it, because, it was basically, politics and bullshit. This basically, they did it for fucking, they didn't do it because the fans wanted it. They did it so they could look good in the eyes of the public. I'm trying to think of the word, but WWE introduced women's tag division. WWE introduced a tag team belts, WWE's women's tag team titles, and they didn't even have a damn division. They didn't have one single, outside of one or two women's tag teams, and that's it. And to this day, they still don't really have a women's tag division. Now, my thing with AEW is I hope that they do it the right way. I hope that they have, which they kind of already do. They have several, tag teams, factions, if you will, in the women's division in AEW. So they could certainly make this work if they stick to it, you know. But to me, the big thing is how will they go about it? They have to go about it the right way, you know. You don't want to make the same mistake that WWE did with their women's tag team division, where they just threw belts together just because, you know, just to appeal to, just to cater to a fucking narrative, you know. They have to do this the right way, you know. And they do need to establish a women's division, a women's tag division now. In addition to, of course, they got the Women's World Championship, the Women's World Title Division, and the TBS Title Division. Now they have to establish a Women's Tag Team Division, which I think they can. They've got a big enough roster. They got a deep enough roster now. If you had asked me like a year, 2 years ago, I would have said, nah, I don't think it's gonna work because their women's division isn't that deep, or you know, it was. They had women there, but it wasn't like as deep as it is now. You see, now I think they're in a spot where they can facilitate a women's tag team division. And so the only question is, you know, how will they go about it? And so that remains to be seen. I do think that AEW has deep enough of a women's roster now in terms of both AEW and Ring of Honor, if they want to kind of float it between, you know, AEW and Ring of Honor. Which I think they will, because you know some of their women's, you know, some of the Ring of Honor talents make appearances on AEW anyway. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they go about it. I do think they've got a deep enough roster to facilitate it, and we'll see where they go from here. But very much looking forward to seeing what they do, like how they introduce them. Like I said before, maybe a tournament, maybe, you know, qualifying matches or something to that effect, and we'll see what happens. You know, there's several, you know. We've seen over the last several months, you know, several pairings, you know, of women. So, you know, you've basically already established a women's tag division in a sense. Now all that's left is, you know, to crown the inaugural champions. So we'll see what happens. But I've already, off the top of my head, I can think of several tag teams in the running already. You look at, you know, Megan Bayne, Penelope Ford. You look at that faction, the Triangle of Madness, with Julia Hart and Sky Blue and Tekla. You look at Harley Cameron and Harley Cameron, and who did she team up with? She teamed up with a couple. There was a couple of women she teamed up with. You know, Harley Cameron. You know, there's several teams in the excuse me, in the AEW women's division that they can have compete for this thing. So again, the only question is how they go about it, and yeah, that remains to be seen. But women's tag titles officially introduced. AEW will have a women's tag team division, and yeah, so we'll have to wait and see how they crown the inaugural champions. I imagine that will happen at Wrestle Dream, which takes place. They announced it tonight, and it takes place officially October 18th. Wrestle Dream, from St. Louis, Missouri. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say for this video. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, give me your thoughts on anything I've talked about here, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Appreciate all the support I can get. With that being said, it's pretty much going to do it, man. So thanks for watching again. More content to come in the coming days and the coming weeks, all that kind of stuff as we wrap up the rest of 2025. But that's going to be it for me. Till next time, Wrestling Taco, I'm out. See you guys later. Peace.